go ahead and get started, and people can join as they like here. So welcome everyone. It's good to have you all here with us on this BBB webinar in partnership with SwickTech, Leveled Up Cybersecurity for your small business. My name is Julie Albrecht. I'm the Director of Marketing Communications here at the BBB, and I also serve as the Executive Director of our BBB Foundation as well. So it's really our pleasure to offer educational webinars and events like this to the local Wisconsin business community. And BBB is a proud partner of the National Cybersecurity Alliance. And so we're actively involved in helping to educate the public, both businesses and consumers, about best practices for protecting themselves and their employees online. So on that note, I am very happy to introduce Eric and Peter with SwickTech, a BBB accredited business, and they're going to take us through some of those key ways that we can protect ourselves and our businesses from cyber attacks. So welcome, Peter. Welcome, Eric. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Hey, great. Yeah, thanks for the intro. We'll dive right in here. Today's presentation is titled Cybersecurity and CMMC. We'll talk about what that means and whether or not you're doing anything with something that's called CMMC. If you're not, it's still a really great way to improve your cybersecurity posture. And if you are, it's something that you're going to have to do by 2026. So we'll dive in here a little bit insofar as who SwickTech is for those who are not familiar that maybe seen us around or have not. We're located right here in New Berlin, Wisconsin. We were founded in 2004. We have about 30 employees, I think maybe 32 now. So we did okay over the pandemic and we didn't lose anybody, and we've been hiring and growing. So lots of positive things happening over here, but I'll read off the screen for this one because I don't think I can say any better, but we do believe that all companies have the potential to grow when they embrace evolving technology and an IT team who puts relationships and the future first. And some of our unique propositions in terms of who we are, we do have cybersecurity running through our blood. It's in our DNA. So even though it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, it's always Cybersecurity Awareness Month at SwickTech, 24/7, 365. We are deep below the Earth's core, digging in, burrowing into more ways to protect businesses. So it's our objective on the marketing seat to kind of bring that to the Earth's surface and educate and articulate some of that to the folks that are joining us today. Since we've been in business since 2004, we've lost 0 bytes of any client data. We have a really strong backup paradigm that we've engineered. It's very affordable, it's very elastic, but it's very safe. So in terms of like a ransomware outbreak, you're very well protected with that. And we deploy something called Net Promoter Score, also known as the NPS survey. We do that at key intersections throughout working with our clients through onboarding projects, and just generally throughout the year, we kind of do a tally of, hey, how are we doing? And according to their metrics, we have a world-class customer service score for our industry and space and size, which is something that we're very proud of. To go a little bit deeper, my name is Eric Clark. I'm a client success associate. I think my title just got changed to business development associate, but I sit in a seat here. I do some account management, some outside sales, and some of the marketing. So with a small business, we all can wear a few different hats here, but I'm with the company for about 5 years, and I really enjoy doing these presentations. And Peter, I'll let you introduce yourself before we dive in.
Hi, Peter Van Loan. I'm a fairly newbie to the SwickTech space. My role is a technical account manager. So as we onboard clients and we have clients going forward, my job is to make sure that everything is working right and make sure that everybody's happy.
Perfect. So today, as we dive in, I know there's only a few folks on the call, so it's a little bit of an intimate session here, but for anybody watching this after the fact, this will be a fun exercise for those folks that are actually participating actively. What is the highest paying job in IT security? I love asking this question, and I love seeing what people have to say. Some people might think it's the CISO or the lead software engineer or sales engineer or architect. And although these are all very high paying positions, of upwards of, $300,000 for that CISO position, depending on where you are in the country and your seniority and all of that. There's actually, cybercrime is the highest paying job in all of technology. These are all bootleg criminal and illegal activities that are happening. And these are people that are stealing data and reselling it on the dark web. These are folks that are encrypting it and ransoming it to companies to decrypt it. And they're hacking bank accounts and making fraudulent transfers. So in a 2021 world, we have really well-funded nation states that are attacking our summer ground here in the US. And it's folks like the Russian Business Network, their Carbonic Group, Casa Nostra, Yakuza. These are, some of these terms are even hard to pronounce. The Sinaloa drug cartel as examples. You know, they're stealing and hacking accounts at something, this is a term I've only come across in this research, 2 petabytes a day, worth $10 million each, and there's virtually zero cost. So this criminal activity can go, you know, all the way from just an idea in the morning to fully operational in the afternoon, and to millions of dollars in profit by the end of the day. And when you consider some of the headlines that you're seeing when you look at the news, or you're on your Google News, or wherever you're getting your information, I could plaster hundreds of these stories across one of these slides. I've only chosen to do 4. One that you might recognize recently was the Colonial Pipeline. They paid roughly $5 million in ransom to hackers. So when these attacks are happening and they're effective and they work, they reinvest that money back in. So this really is an arms race on cybercrime. It's really difficult to then protect yourself. They're not targeting you necessarily as a small business, but they're casting a net and they're looking for weaknesses that they can exploit. And by gosh, they will find those exploits and they will act on them. You know, so the reality of what's going on here behind the scenes is cybercrime is big business. When they've gotten big dollars in the millions, they can fund things like this. It looks like a call center. This is bigger than a lot of businesses that I've walked into and worked with here locally in Southeast Wisconsin and Northern Illinois. They actually have a help desk. If anyone's ever seen me do a presentation like this before, you may have seen these slides. They help you set up a Bitcoin account. And if they've done a good job and you were able to pay them and get your data back, they'll ask you for a rating and review. So you know it was easy to do business with these criminals. It's terrible. So if we kind of rewind a little bit here and go back to CMMC, which Peter is going to define, or I'm going to define, someone's going to define it in a little bit.
I think you're doing that.
Okay. The primary goal of CMMC is to improve and ensure the safeguarding of sensitive data, including controlled unclassified information, COI. It's a very important term in technology, but elsewhere as well, and federal contract information associated with federal contracts. And so just a little bit of history here as to what that is and why that's only a small part of this presentation today. We have other presentations that go far in depth because it's a very deep topic. But just to give you the bite-sized nuggets, in 2017, subcontractors were required to complete something called an SSP, which stands for System Security Plan. And now that assessment of where they stood was relative to that SSP had to have something also called a POAM, also called the Plan of Action and Milestones. That would help them close that gap from a security standpoint, a cybersecurity standpoint. And that used something called, if you're in the manufacturing space, if you hold any government contracts with the DoD, it's called NIST 800-171. Now in 2019, the DoD realized that not really anyone was doing anything with that. They were just kind of arbitrarily checking boxes saying, it's good enough, or yeah, we've covered that. But CMMC, here's my definition, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, was created as a way to hold the feet to the fire, so to speak, where there's going to be likely a governing body that's going to be accredited to do these audits and make sure that these standards are done. So if you are holding a government contract or you intend to, then you need to do these things. Now, why that's relevant for anyone that's not is that this is about the best standard to follow for some of the best practices to improve your cybersecurity posture. And it's something that you can look to measure against, rather than just saying, oh, I went to this webinar or this seminar and this person said that and that person said this. This is a governing body of standards that you can look to determine how cyber secure am I. And if we go back to that, you know, all of those scary things coming up on the screen of all the different headlines from companies being hacked across the US. Some of these are really big companies. So like, what does that have to do with the price of tea in China, right? What does that have to do with my business? Well, if you consider the cyber attack for the Colonial Pipeline, it was compromised via a password. That's it. Someone somewhere in their organization diverged or divulged their password somewhere they probably shouldn't have. And that's likely the cause of a phishing campaign or social engineered phishing campaign or spearing campaign. So at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, am I the firewall? Because these attacks can route themselves completely around and away from your layered cyber, efforts such as like physical hardware, like firewalls, and some of the software things like antivirus and anti-malware and anti-spam and things of that nature. If someone spoofs someone you're doing business with, a vendor or a supplier, and you've suddenly now given up your information, that hacker can go in and do what they need to do to infiltrate a network. And they can do that really rapidly. So they have circumvented all of those things you've put in place. So at the end of the day, I like this meme because you want me to root the firewall. I am the firewall. It's confusing. Maybe I should go take a nap. I would really actually like to go take a nap. So insofar as the topics we'll be covering, we're going to talk about how to make this practical for the folks that are on this webinar today. So Peter's going to drive from here forward for a bit and talk about email security, account security, and phishing more directly. So Peter, if I get stuck on a slide, just prod me along and let me know when to change it up, but I'll continue on here.
I'll signal in some way. So yeah, in answer to your question, Eric, are you the firewall? I think the answer definitively is yes, you are. And in fact, it's not you, it's us, it's we. We are the firewall. Our businesses deploy technology, and that technology is important, it's significant. But when we look at the three topics, you want to bounce back to that three topics slide again just for a moment. Email security, email tends to be the major vector for cyber criminal phishing. It's today's social engineering. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get further on. Account security, it's about passwords, but it's also about the other kinds of hurdles that we personally and organizationally can put in the way of the cyber criminals, right? We want to make the path to our data as difficult to get to as it's possible. And so that's what account security is about. And then phishing, well, phishing is phishing, I guess. I think everybody kind of knows what phishing is. It's essentially the same old, but in today's world, it's maybe a little bit more astonishingly sophisticated. So there's a variety of kinds of phishing, and we'll talk about that. So first thing we're going to look at is email security. And there's going to be a ton of slides on this because, again, it's the major vector that people use to get at us individually to break down our sort of individual firewall services to gain some information that they can use to leverage. So the first thing we're going to look at is an email sender. Somebody sent you an email. And what they're doing is they're trying to make the email look as though it's coming from somebody that you know. So for example, perhaps you get email from Peter at SwickTech fairly often. So you see this email, peter@swicktechcorp.com. Well, swicktechcorp.com isn't SwickTech's domain. So this is a person who knows about the peter@swicktech.com account and knows that you know this peter@swicktech.com. How do they know that? Probably because of an earlier phishing attempt from somebody. And they're counting on you not noticing that this domain isn't right. If we look at the other examples, help@microsoft-techsupport.biz. Does that really seem like it'd be a legitimate domain for an email from Microsoft Help? It doesn't. It's not a legitimate domain. They've munged or changed the domain name of the sender, hoping that you won't notice that it's a little bit off. Next slide. So this next one is a flipped iteration of the same kind of thing. Instead of a falsified domain, we have a falsified sender. So you're used to getting mail from Peter at SwickTech. So they created a user account called Peter SwickTech, but it's at gmail.com. It's not at swicktech.com. So they're hoping that you'll see Peter SwickTech and go, oh yeah, I know Peter at SwickTech. I get emails from him fairly regularly. Let me go ahead and open this email and click on attachments or click on links that Peter sent to me, hoping that you're not going to notice that gmail.com is the incorrect domain. Similar with Microsoft support. Is Microsoft support going to be sending you email from a yahoo.com domain? I don't think so. Similar with Google fraud department at Gmail. That's just not the way domains work. Major corporate or even small business corporate senders send email from their actual domains, not from some other. Next slide. So in addition to just having faked up domains and faked up usernames, one of the things that bad actors will do, they'll send you an email that contains a link in it. And the thing about a link is that it can have malware. The malware can be in an attachment, or it can just be in the link itself. So what you need to do is you need to understand that when you receive email, email is a package. You need to make sure that the package looks right, that all the details about it are correct. And then before you click on a link, you need to investigate that link. So let's look at, if you want to go to the next slide, Eric. Thank you. Let's look first just at the anatomy of a link so that we kind of understand what makes a link up. So anything that comes before the colon // you can mostly ignore that. There is a case, we'll talk about it in a slide later on, when that's not exactly the case, but for the most part, when you're trying to identify where will you go to if you click a link, you look at the stuff that follows the // and before the first slash. So in the middle there, in this example, www.mydomain.com, that's where you're going to go. Anything after that final slash, typically, again, there might be one scenario or two where it's not the case, but for the most part, you don't have to pay much attention to what comes after the /. Next slide. Okay, so one of the things that makes this maybe even trickier is that sometimes you you get an email and it contains a link, and sometimes the link is just in clear text. So they typed out the link in the email and hit enter, and it turned blue and it turned into a link, and you can see just by looking at it clearly what the parts of the link are. But one of the things that people can do when they create a link is there's two parts to that link. First part is the web address itself, the actual URL that takes you to where you go when you click the link. And the other part is a picture or display text. So in our examples here, click here to track your package. Well, clearly those words aren't the link. But if you click on that object, it will take you to the web address that's associated with that display text, essentially. So in this case, click here to track your package, but instead of going to FedEx, you'd be going to ransomware-download.com. Probably not good. Similar with www.yourbank or creditunion.com. It's probably not going to be stealyourpassword.net or www.illegalstuff.info. So what do you do with that? Well, the first most important thing is you've received an email, you've investigated the package of the email, you've looked at who it was from, and it basically looks okay. And then there's a link in there, and now are you going to click on the link? You want to hover your mouse over the link, because your email packages or your browser will display the contents of the link before you click it. So hover your email over the link, see where is it going. So if you've got an email from Peter at SwickTech or an email from Microsoft.com, and they're providing a link to you, make sure that the link is going to SwickTech.com or Microsoft.com and not ransomware-download.com. Next slide, please. This is a little bit of an awkward play. I couldn't find a really good place for this slide, but I think it's something important that you should be aware of. There's two kinds of communication that occur between your computer and its web browser and the destination site that you go to. The first kind is just called HTTP. It's kind of old school. It's the basic communication. HTTP, those of you that might be interested, hypertext transfer protocol. The thing about HTTP is that anything that's communicated between your browser and the destination site is insecure. It's not encrypted, which means it's in clear text. So if there's anyone in your area there's a variety of ways that they might be able to intercept your communications. They'll be able to see anything that you type. So if you're going to a website and you're logging in, it's asking for a username and a password, and that site isn't secured, your password and your username are vulnerable to being intercepted. So a secure site is encrypted, and it's using a protocol called HTTPS. The S basically just means secure, and your browser will tell you that you have an encrypted connection. So it's important, again, to notice if you're being prompted to log in, make sure that you're using a secure connection. Now, I've added this thing at the bottom of this slide because there's a couple of situations where you might see this error message, this alert message that the browser is showing in the picture. You go to a website and it's using HTTPS, but there's something wrong with the security certificate that is responsible for enabling the encryption of your communication. So your browser is telling you, the certificate that's associated with this site is expired, or it's just been damaged, or maybe it's what's called a self-signed certificate, and your browser doesn't recognize the authority of the entity that issued the certificate. Whatever the case is, if you go to a website, with one exception, if you go to a website that shows you this and it asks you to log in, don't. Make some calls, talk to your tech support team. Be sure before you enter any confidential information into that site that this is a legitimate site that's not going to be stealing your info. The one exception, not going to spend much time on it, but sometimes within companies have internal web services that they deploy that are not publicly accessible. They're only internally accessible. Sometimes, especially smaller companies, don't take the time, maybe don't have the technical expertise to make sure that all their web services have a trusted and understood and valid certificate in place. So some people will get used to going to this website. It's something they have to do every day, and it shows this not secure message. That's the only time that you can feel comfortable doing that. Next slide, please. So we're going to have a little quiz here, and it's difficult to do a lot of interaction. We don't have a lot of people, so I'm not going to, I think, actually ask you to raise your hand and answer these questions, but I'll kind of do it for us as we go. So what we're going to see is on the left are some sample links, and we're going to identify what's the domain, what's the location that we would be taken to if we clicked on this link. So google.trustworthy.biz, is that a Google thing? Trustworthy.biz is the site that you're going to go to. So if somebody's trying to fool you, ooh, this is a Google thing, I can trust that, I'll click it. No, it's going to be Trustworthy Biz. And so in this case, hopefully that was intended, and hopefully they really are trustworthy. Drive.google.com. And then my-document.com. That's going to take us to google.com, green, good to go. Looks like what we expect. Netflix.com. This is a little confusing maybe. You see the slash and then these random characters, and that can look, it's a little scary. What are all these random characters? Well, again, after the / doesn't matter. It's netflix.com. The stuff after the slash, that's probably the movie you want to get a preview of. www.microsoft.com.pc-hosting.ru. I don't think you want to go to pc-hosting.ru ever, probably, and certainly not to log into your Microsoft account. bankofamerica.online.silverfish.net. Silverfish.net, Bank of America, are they asking you for, or giving you some information about your bank account, but their website that they're linking you to is at silverfish.net? I don't think so. I'm going to give a quick.
I was going to say on the RU one, by the way, that's a Russian domain. That's what .ru
right,
is. So,
right.
Please don't go there.
Right, please don't go there. I want to talk about the silverfish.net one real quick. Sometimes companies do have third-party partners. So you might go to a company site, legitimate website, and they have a service that they provide to you that's offered through a third party. So there are times you might go to SwickTech, .net or .com, where you might go to Microsoft.com and click on a link, and then where it takes you is not to Microsoft.com. That doesn't necessarily mean instantly that you're going to a bad place. So just because the domain doesn't necessarily match the domain of where you click the link on, you have to be context aware. You have to use your judgment. You have to be vigilant. This stuff isn't easy. You have to pay attention. Wikipedia.org. Where's that taking us? It's taking us to wikipedia.org. You can feel confident of that. Messenger.facebook.hostbin.com. Again, it just doesn't feel right, does it? Hostbin.com. What's that got to do with Facebook? I know they put Facebook in the name there, but hostbin.com. No, that's not from Facebook. And then this one, it'd be fun if we could actually get a raise of hands. I don't think we're going to mess with that, but when you first look at this, what do you see? I know I saw, when I saw this example, I saw google.com. Oh, that's good. Wait a minute. It's Google or Google.com. So again, this is all about attempts by bad actors, by these nefarious folks, to trick you into clicking on stuff. All right. There's an even more sneaky and maybe a little bit more difficult thing to explain that can happen sometime. And it's when a link contains redirect code. And what I mean by that is that, when you're a web developer, if you, and by the way, a web developer, that's just something that we call somebody who would otherwise be a hacker, but they don't have evil intent, right? So if you're a web developer, somebody without evil intent, you might embed a link in some code and then have that code do things to the link when you click on it. And the things that it does to the link might be totally appropriate. And in fact, you might click on the link and the link looks normal.com, but it redirects to a different site. And that's perfectly acceptable and perfectly normal, unless it's a hacker that created the code that presents the link. And then the trouble with this is that if you pause your cursor over a link and it shows you where the destination is, it might or might not show you that that link is redirected to someplace else. It might show you that it's going to looksnormal.com, but not that it's actually going to bad-website.com/virus. I love these names. Okay, next slide. So email security, the other thing that email can deliver is attachments. And this is I don't want to beat anybody over the head, but I think the theme here about security is that you are the firewall. Thank you, Eric, for that idea and image, because it's powerful. It's true. Your job is to be context aware. So in this particular case, we're showing an example of somebody called Barrett Gallagher from an email domain, airtelbroadband.in, but he's sending an email ostensibly from Community Health Systems. And probably Barrett Gallagher is probably a name of somebody that you've worked with at Community Health Systems, but this guy is sending an email posing as Barrett Gallagher, wanting you to open this attachment. And the reason they want you to open the attachment is it's probably got bad stuff in it. It's probably got malware that's going to infect your PC or going to trap your username and password. Next slide.
But I'll just also add that I would love someone to send me an invoice in a Word document, because I'll just edit it to $0.
So again, the focus here is on being context aware. So you got an email, it's got an attachment, but you look at the email and the from information looks like it's from a suspect domain. And then you look at the text of the email and there's I's not capitalized, and there's, just contractions and things that just don't seem right. You need to think about who you receive email from, usually the kind of sentence structure that they put together in their emails. I mean, not everybody's formal in their email, not everybody's formal in the language that they use in emails, but You need to look for those kinds of contextual clues to see whether or not you can trust what's being delivered by the email.
Yeah, and I know auto predict on your cell phones likes to take over from time to time, but this is a different type of thing, you know.
Yep. Yep. But it is tricky. You're exactly right. It's tricky. It's sometimes tricky to parse out. Is this somebody that was in a hurry? Is this somebody that's typing out from their phone? Again, it's just context, and you've got to use your judgment. So where can malicious code live? Somebody sends you an email and it includes a graphics file. Unfortunately, you open that graphics file, it can contain malicious code. It's just the way of the world at this point. Be context aware, know who's sending you and what they're sending you. Next slide. It can hide in doc files. I don't think we need to spend too much more time on that. It's an attachment. You need to be clear that this is a known and expected document before you go ahead and open it up.
And I'll add that they being these attackers, when Peter talked about the sophistication of some of these things, they're playing on human emotion. So they'll play on current events, they'll play on fear and time. So if there's some sort of sense of urgency, just take a second and realize, look, this isn't how urgent really is it. If I need to do this thing in 1 hour or do it now, just take a second to really consider what's happening. Subpoena is going to elicit some fear response. Your images on your website have been copyright infringed is going to elicit some sort of fear response. Like, again, a subpoena is not going to come to you in the way of a Word document. But some of these attacks look pretty darn good. Like, we get eyes on a lot of them, and some of them are like, wow, that's impressive, because that's going to dupe a lot of people.
It can really be amazing. You've got to just take some time, breathe deep, learn, look at the context, use some judgment, take some time. Next slide. Directly speaking to what Eric was mentioning, they're going to look to manipulate you in any way. So COVID has been a big deal for the last, oh gosh, has it been 10 years? Hackers will compose emails trying to exploit the fact that you might be anxious about things having to do with COVID. And so you get an email that says COVID alert, and you might be very interested in right now finding out what's in that document. Don't do it. Now, protected view. Sometimes you get an email, it's got an attachment. You've looked at the container of the email and it looked okay, came from somebody you thought was, you know, an expected sender, and you checked out the domain and everything is good, but you don't know that person's email account might have been compromised, and the attachment that got sent was not from that person, but from the hacker who compromised the email account. So, but you don't think about that. So you get the email, it seems to be trusted, you double click to open the attachment, you get this message: this document is in protected view. Be careful, files from the internet can be bad. Unless you need to edit the file, keep it in protected view. This is really, really good advice. And what it's speaking to is that documents can have essentially macros built into them. And if you click that enable editing button, that's going to enable the macros, which can then trigger an assault against you. Vigilance, this is what we need. Okay, account security. So we're done with email. There's a lot of different ways that you can be targeted, that you could accidentally provide information from a hacker to a hacker that would enable a hacker to exploit you or your company. But it's not just email, it's also how you handle, how you think about securing your accounts in general. Next slide. So this slide, and again, it's another email, but what it's saying to you is, hey, we've noticed some bad things happening. We've noticed that you logged in from Nigeria, and we don't think you're in Nigeria because we think you're in the United States. So this might mean that your account has been hacked, and we'd like you to please either call us or click on this link to review your activity so that we can confirm that Nigerian login was incorrect. And you know, this looks pretty legit. I've gotten emails similar to this from other services that I've logged into, and this account somehow got hacked. I need to go change my password right away to fix it. But we've been talking about being aware of the container of the email. So if Windows error report is really from Microsoft, would it come from Microsoft team at mstream2@outlook.com? I don't think so. If you click this link or if you dial that phone number, you're being phished. Next.
Yeah, I'll just add too that like the red line on here really speaks to the fact that this is very well composed for its time when this was deployed. And as a result, going back to that anatomy of a domain name, that's where some of this training comes into place. Like use your training, remember your training, because unless you look there, this is legit. This is very legitimate. Again, unless you're hovering over that review recent activity, which looks like it's some sort of button, it's not. It's just going to take you somewhere terrible, or it might take you somewhere that looks also legit to then grab your password. And I think that's probably where you're going here. But I just,
Exactly. Or the phone number.
Things you're saying. Yep.
Or the phone number. If you call the phone number, it's not going to be Microsoft. It's going to be the scammer's phone bank. Eric showed you the pictures of their call centers. You're going to be talking to somebody at a call center, and they're going to be trying to edge out from you details about your account, your login name, your password, maybe other hints about your account that they could later use to exploit you. This is another one. You might click on a link somewhere in an application. This window pops up and says, oh, in order to get this, you need to sign into your Microsoft account. Well, this is legitimately something that can sometimes occur. You might have access to a SharePoint site that you don't go to a lot. You get an email, it's got a link to the SharePoint site, and it prompts you to log into that SharePoint site. Again, look at what's in the red box. accountoffice.dynv6.net. That's not Microsoft. Don't be fooled by the really professional and sort of perfect looking login dialog box and think that you're actually logging into your SharePoint account. Next slide. So account security, just some guidelines. Don't reuse your passwords across sites and services. I'm going to say especially across any sites where confidential information is stored, where you've got a credit card, or there's health information, or there's legal information, or anything that you value in any way at all. Make sure that you're using unique passwords for those sites. Use a password manager. We'll talk about that in the next slide. Also avoid the use of simple words or common phrases. Like the classic example is, your password shouldn't be the word password. And no, it doesn't really matter if you put the @ sign for the A and 2 O's or 2 zeros for the O's. You want to avoid those kinds of passwords. You don't want to include your birthday. You don't want to include your pet names or your first pet names or anything, especially if you're on social media and you're taking part in any of those quizzes that ask you for what was your first pet's name or what kind of dog was your first dog. All that's information that they can leverage, that bad actors can leverage to discover your accounts. Also, turn on multi-factor authentication for all accounts. So we're going to talk about that in a couple of slides to come. And then one last thing, and this is a little bit new. So, as we go forward in life, we learn things. So it used to be a few years ago that the watchword was you need strong passwords, and then those passwords need to change frequently, because otherwise they're exposed to being hacked upon, and then eventually that password will get leaked out. And so then if you change the passwords, it secures you. But what we've learned in the meantime is that really having a really strong password that rarely is changed is far better than having a weak password that changes a lot. So companies that have been in the past that have required passwords to change every 30 days or 60 days or 90 days are beginning to rethink that, and instead requiring more complex passwords and then allowing users to keep them for longer periods of time. This is especially useful if you're actually not reusing passwords across sites.
And I think with the long password kind of phrases, there's a certain threshold of the number of characters where, like, quite literally it'll take quantum computing to crack it. I don't know if it's 18 characters. I'm going to be wrong about that. You might want to do some Googling there, but at a certain threshold of characters, even the best bots in the world on today's
Yeah.
present time are not able to crack those things. So those,
If
I think you get to that in this next slide here. So I apologize if I keep stealing your thunder.
oh no, you're fine. If anybody knows the web comic Oatmeal, he's got a great. If you Google Oatmeal comic passwords, you'll bump into a really great link that explains why a long password that's a phrase that's easy for you to remember is much more secure than a few random characters. Even if it seems crazy, it's much more secure, much more difficult to hack.
I'm not saying this is my password, but if I want to tell myself, please don't forget my anniversary every year, and that's the whole password,
Right.
now I'm doing two things. I'm not going to forget my wedding anniversary, and I have a very strong password. So just things like that are like, hey, you could even ask yourself a question, what's my kid's birthday, or different things like that, or the commute to work sucks. Long phrases of things that you can remember. A phrase is easy to remember. So yeah.
Okay, so why use a password manager? What is a password manager? So first of all, it's the ability to utilize truly unique passwords. Password managers can auto-generate a password for you for each and every site. Then, because they can autofill the passwords for you when you open the application or go to the website, you don't need to remember the passwords. So an auto-generated long complex password that you don't even really know, because you don't need to know, because it gets autofilled for you. That data is stored in an encrypted format. It's only accessible to you. And then a lot of these offer cross-device functionality. So you can have it installed on your PC, you can have it installed on your tablet, you can have it installed on your other mobile devices. So as you go to all these websites on the different different devices, you can log in, and it's easy to manage. It's also kind of nice because for each site, there's places where you can type some notes and you can list some other details. So there's other things, other mnemonic things, or just little details that you need to remember about the site that you can store in the password manager entries for the site. Next slide.
I'll add to that, as a business, let's say you have a social media manager or someone like that in marketing, and maybe they're going to create a Canva account and an Adobe account and a Facebook profile and a YouTube account. Some of these things, they might just be for sake of ease using their own personal Gmail and login information, or creating these new accounts with your company name, but then they're creating their own passwords. And if those aren't stored somewhere, when that person leaves, you may have experienced this, it can be a real pain in the rear to get back into that account if that person is no longer with the company. But from a security standpoint, that's your business's information. So if you're using a password manager, it lives there, it's accessible by the company, and it's now not tied to that individual who might be going from company to company at a younger age if they're in that kind of greener role. So now you're not also then having to do password resets every time you have to deal with that scenario. So again, it's the company's login, not just that person's.
And even at a personal level, right? So the companies can and probably should deploy password managers for all of their users. And then individual users, there's very affordable, some even free password managers that individuals can use to protect their own passwords.
Yeah, I think I use Bitwarden for my own personal stuff. It's on my phone. It's really easy to copy and move. It's just, it's very easy. It's securer than what I would be doing anyways. Here's your other slide. Sorry, Peter.
That's fine. So the next thing, account security. We encourage you, it's really important, especially on important accounts, that you enable multi-factor authentication. So what is multi-factor authentication? Well, there are a variety of factors that you can bring to a login scenario. One is a knowledge factor. It's something that you know, something that the user knows. That's a classic example of your password. There's also possession factors. So something that the user brings with them. So I have my cell phone, and that cell phone can be running an app, or I might have a little USB dongle that's a secondary multi-factor device. We'll explain it in a little bit. Or you might be prompted to use biometric. Like there are some sites that I go to that when I go to them, I have to log in, but then I also have to present my fingerprint and have that validated before I can get to the site. Next slide. So this slide represents a multi-factor configuration using the Microsoft Authenticator app. On the left side shows some application, some web application probably, that a user is trying to log into. And the screen shows us after the user has put in their username and password, and they hit enter, and the login was validated. But then before it allows them to continue, it prompts for a code. And so the user then picks up their phone or their tablet or whatever it is, goes to the Microsoft Authenticator app, finds in the app the site name that they're trying to log into, opens that up, and it'll present a code. Then you just type in the code field, you type the code that the Authenticator app shows you, and it validates in the back end that that code came from the Authenticator app that indeed belongs to you, and that matches with the account that's trying to log in, and then it lets you log in. Next slide is another method of doing multi-factor. This I'm showing a hardware device called a YubiKey. And all it is a little USB dongle. They have variety of form factors and different kinds of USB and that kind of thing, but it works essentially like the Authenticator app, except it automatically ingests what they call the one-time password, the OTP. So what happens is you go to your application has been configured to know that a YubiKey is going to be involved in the login sequence. In this case, the application that I'm showing is a webmail interface. You type in your username and password, but then it prompts for a YubiKey one-time password. You stick the YubiKey into a USB in your device, and you press your finger on the little gold Y, and it generates a unique code that it injects automatically into the field there for the YubiKey OTP. And as long as the code matches as having come from the YubiKey device that you own and matches the account that you're trying to log into, it validates your login. Next slide. So phishing, I've got here a short history and description, and it ended up, it's pretty short, but so when phishing was first really a thing, I mean, I mentioned it earlier, but social engineering was really the first kind of phishing, right? It was a bad guy, maybe we saw it in a movie, that was walked into a reception desk and would start asking questions, trying to get some information that he really shouldn't have. And he gets a little nugget of information, and then he can use that information, that nugget, to get some other nuggets of information. And before you know it, an international spy scenario has broken out. Well, the modern version of that is really what we call phishing. And the standard kind of phishing, it's like all phishing, it's just an attempt to steal confidential information. But when it first started out, it was this huge wide net. So there would be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of emails that they would send out. And it was fairly crude, just trying to get any hits from this sort of widely cast net. But in today's world, I mean, there's still some of that going on, and there's still, in fact, some social engineering going on. In fact, quite a bit of it. But we've got some varieties of phishing that are sometimes astonishingly sophisticated. Let's go to the next slide, and we'll kind of walk us. Let's kind of count it down. So the first one, standard phishing. We've already talked about it. Let's go to the next one. Malware phishing. So malware phishing is, you get an email, it's got a link or it's got an attachment. That link or attachment has malware, and the job of the malware is to prompt you to log in, or in other ways to provide information that the hacker can use. Spear phishing is an especially interesting one. Spear phishing is like the big fish, right? So somebody has identified, maybe there's a founder of a big company, a public company, or a CEO of a big company. They've identified that person. They want to target that person. They do deep research into who this person is and who he associates with, and find out about his family as much as they can. They find all kinds of details, and then they compose a really sophisticated campaign to hack into this guy's account by leveraging everything that they know. So it's spear phishing because they're going after that big game. Next one, SMS plus phishing equals smishing. This is, I don't know where, how did it get to be called that? I don't know, SMS plus phishing. You receive text, I do. I don't know if you do. I receive text all the time that have a link. Click this link.
Track your FedEx package.
Right. Track your FedEx
UPS
package.
is coming. Your package is tracked on the map. Oh my gosh, I track that all the time. But wow, is this one doesn't look right? So
it's not the same. Or IRS, you're delinquent on your taxes. Click this link, and all it is an attempt to steal your information. Next one, search engine phishing. This one is pretty sophisticated. It's basically companies that create sites and then promote those sites in the search engines. And then when people land on those sites as a result of doing a search, instead of being a legitimate site, the site has, its links are all malware. Next one, vishing. This one troubles me in terms of, I don't know why it's a phone or video phishing, I guess. It's basically they're calling you up. So this is the IRS scam, or the Microsoft, there's something wrong with your PC. I'm from Microsoft support. Please give me your username and password. And so they attempt to keep you on the line as long as they can so that they can identify something that they can use. Next one, farming. This is a super sophisticated one that involves manipulating DNS. And I'm not going to get into a lot of the bones of it, but DNS is essentially the phone book that helps us find all the websites that we're looking for. And it's possible in specific kinds of scenarios that a hacker can manipulate your machine, your browser, so that it refers to a specific DNS server that has changed information. So now you think you're going to www.microsoft.com, and it goes to a site that looks like it could be Microsoft.com, but it's really not. And so as you then interact on the Microsoft.com site, you're giving them information that they're looking to get. Next one, clone phishing. This is another tricky one. Somebody's email account has been hacked. The hacker goes through the email, identifies some emails that the legitimate sender has been sending to legitimate recipients, and they create essentially a replica of that legitimate email, that the kinds of email that have already been sent by this user, and they create their own. It mirrors exactly like what the legit emails have been, and then they send them out to people in the hacked users email address book. So unsuspecting users get this email. It's from Ted, this guy that's trusted, and it's the kind of email they've gotten before. The only thing is the attachment and the Julie says we see them all the time. The attachment or the links are hacks, right? They're malicious code. Next one, man in the middle. You're at a public coffee shop. You hop onto their Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi doesn't require a password. Oh, that's convenient. You don't have to mess around with getting the password. Unfortunately, what that means is that Wi-Fi isn't secured. So now you go to your bank and go to log in. Well, somebody else sitting at that coffee shop or in the shop next door in a car out in front of the street is also logged on to that wireless, and he's able to capture your login attempts. And sometimes it can be so much so that they entirely capture your login attempt, get your username and password, then they log into the target site for you so that you get to the sites as you expected. But in the meantime, they've captured your information. Don't do things that you have to log into when you're in an unsecured wireless. Use a VPN, talk to people like SwickTech. We can help you secure your communications. Next one, business email compromise. This is a kind of ploy. So a CEO at a company has been exploited, been hacked. Perhaps the company's just won some kind of a big contract, and the hacked email sends out an email to the team saying, please purchase thousands of dollars worth of gift cards to send to the CEO, and here's the link. Well, unfortunately, you're just redirecting the company's money into the hacker's bank account because it's not really from your CEO. Next one. And then malvertising. It's folks who have businesses, fronts, that put advertising in the web, and the only reason that they're there, really the only legit reason that they're there, is to deliver their malware to your PC. Next. So what can you do? I've been trying to harp on context awareness, taking your time, calming down, not being in a hurry to respond to emails that you get or to situations that are presented to you. It's really important that you also teach your employees to be able to do that. People need to understand what the risks are. They need to understand what this stuff looks like. One of the ways to do that is to conduct against them, I guess you could say, a phishing campaign. SwickTech, we work with a company called KnowBe4. There's others as well. What these companies do is they put together a campaign that produces phishing emails. They're not really phishing emails, but they're sent to your employees, and then the company tracks which of the employees opened the emails, which of the employees clicked on the link, which of the employees dialed the phone numbers, which of the employees opened the attachments, and then that's used as learning material. So, and then those emails can be sent periodically, and you can customize what they look like and the kind of phishing that they do. A super worthwhile way to go about making your workforce a better firewall for your business. Next. This is just an example of kind of putting together a phishing campaign. So they'll put your company logo in, and they set up an email. It'll be like a mail merge kind of email to go to all of your employees, and then they get reports about who opened it, who did what, how do they interact with the email. And next.
Yeah, that's, I think, everything we have, and I think we're right at time also.
Yep.
So yeah, things like, I'll just go back to slides real quick. Spam filtering, there's things you can turn on to improve your posture there. There's different features if you're using Microsoft Microsoft 365. The things you can turn on, like safe links, that'll identify if a link is bad ahead of time, so it'll disable it. Obviously training, and that's piggybacked by some phishing campaigns. KnowBe4 is a product we've used. We also use a Microsoft product. Dark web scanning. You can go to a site called Have I Been Pwned? That's PWN. I believe, which is like a gaming term. But if you put your email in there, it'll tell you if you're using that email account across any sites that have had some sort of incident or exposure or leak of data.
Right.
And then what you would do then, if your email pops up or on a certain site, like maybe it's adobe.com or Facebook or whatever it could be, just
change all your passwords.
Yep. Yeah. But we are having, talking about business email compromise and things like that. We are having what we're calling a cybersecurity think tank. It's coming up on the 27th this month, so 2 weeks away, Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. at the Brookfield Conference Center. For those that are local to this area or might be passing through, get yourself some breakfast and coffee. But also, you're going to hear from a panel of experts. So all those logos at the bottom of the screen represent the businesses and or companies where representatives are going to be speaking on the panel to talk about what they see from their corner of the world in business from a cybersecurity perspective. And obviously, SwickTech will have a seat there as well. Our CEO, Isaac Montagudo, will be speaking on that panel too. And the Better Business Bureau will be there, right, Julie?
That's right. Yeah. Our president and CEO as well, Jim Temmer, will be there on the panel speaking because we, oftentimes are educating the public, like I said at the beginning, about these same things on a little bit more basic level, but, kind of the same overarching tips about secure passwords and making sure that all of your, everything you do really online is secure.
Kurt sent a chat saying that in the last email there was a wrong link for that event.
Oh, thank you for letting me know, Kurt. I will follow up with you and take a look at that email to make sure that we get that corrected. Thank you.
Yep, and we can help you making sure you got the right link if
yeah, it could have come from us. So let us know if we're the problem there.
I'll go ahead and blame you for it. No, I'm just kidding.
Throw some of us. But if you go to SwickTech.com, there's a resource tab or page, and that's where our events are listed. So that'll take you to an Eventbrite login, and you can register there. It's free to attend. We just want to educate the community, the business community at large, and bring a lot of thought leaders together on this topic. It being Cybersecurity Awareness Month this month, we feel that this is a really strong event. We put this on, I think, the last 3 maybe 4 years. I'm just drawing a blank because of the COVID things. But it's been a really great event, even having someone from the district attorney's office there to speak about what happens in the litigation and what they do with the FBI and things of that nature.
Yeah,
Signature Bank.
This should be a great event.
It's just a really powerful event. You're going to learn quite a bit. We're also going to scare the crap out of you. You're going to leave this thing wearing a tinfoil hat. It's pretty alarming. But no, thank you for letting us have some time on your platform today.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Eric, for everything. We really appreciate this. And if anybody has, sure thing, if anybody has questions, feel free to follow up with any one of us, and we'll be happy to talk with you and discuss this more. So thank you so much for your time today. I hopefully we will see a few of you at the think tank panel on the 27th. And thank you. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Bye.
All right. Bye all.